Penn State has to find the right combination of quarterbacks from the portal. Should they take one or not? We're going to talk about that next, right here in this crossover, Locked on Nittany Lions and the portal.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, you are Locked on Nittany Lions and Locked on the Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, along with Zach Sako. Thank you for tuning in to Locked on Nittany Lions and Locked on the Portal each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. We're going to be discussing Penn State making a rather unique recruiting charge with the coaching change towards the end of this show. It's kind of interesting, actually. And Penn State needs a lot of stuff to happen for the class of 27. We will get to that later on in the show. We're going to be grading Penn State's coaching hires to date, who's left, who's come in, what is next for Penn State. But to start the show, and the most important topic, Mr. Sako, we're going to be talking about, should Penn State go to the portal to get a guy that's going to be the dude? Should they just get a backup for Grunkemeyer? How do they want to do it? We both have some opinions on this, so let's dive into that. First off, you're a Penn State guy. You went to Penn State. You cover it. What were your impressions of Grunk when he did get a chance to play? Did you like him? What did you think about him? What do you think his ceiling is?
So I'll start with this. Like Grunkemeyer a ton. And he struggled right out of the gate against Ohio State, top 5 Iowa defense. That's pretty understandable. Then he got it going against Indiana, right? #1 team in the nation, best team in the country. Ethan Grunkemeyer figured it out. The switch flipped in the second half against that Indiana team. That's still a top 15 Indiana defense. So if I'm Penn State, I'm Matt Campbell. I recruited Ethan Grunkemeyer once upon a time. He can be your guy for the foreseeable future, but it might be in Penn State's best interest to actually let him go. That's where I kind of stand on this, because they have no depth. They have yes, there are guys in the room, but it's not reliable. Right now, the depth chart looks like this. Ethan Grunkemeyer as the clear starter. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. He's just scratching the surface. He can be a 3-year starter at the Big Ten level. He's proven that. But Beckham Kritza, Peyton Falzone, Casey Evans, those guys are all unproven. And if Grunkemeyer were to go down, do you trust anyone, a 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman who did not practice a ton because he missed time with injury, significant time, in Beckham Kritza? Penn State's best interest, as much as I want Grunkemeyer to stick around because he's a 3-year starter, are you going to make it a quarterback competition? That would be great. That would be a great idea, to go get somebody comparable to Grunkemeyer and push him. But then you're kind of doing this revolving door still, because then you kick the can down the road and you got to do it again, unless one of those guys develops. So Penn State's best situation, best setup might be to go copy Oregon. Go copy Oregon. You get Dylan Gabriel. You bring in Dante Moore to sit behind him. Do something like that where you have a one-and-done veteran quarterback, and then you get somebody that's just kind of sitting, biding his time, because look how it's benefited Oregon a ton. Copy that blueprint.
That is ideal. The question is, will the guy in Mr. Grunkemeyer accept it? And that's something I have no idea. They're in a rebuild mode. They're in a new staff. They've got a really good staff so far. We'll get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure in today's world how many guys have had a taste of starting or go back to the bench. Dante Moore did it, but that's probably more the exception than the rule. But ideally, I agree. That would be awesome for Penn State. I just don't know if they can get the quarterback to come in to do that, or the quarterback that's currently on the roster to accept it. Those are 2 big ifs.
I imagine that Grunkemeyer transfers out if they go with that. Why would he just started the final half of the season. Why would he go back and be QB2? James Franklin, his coach, who he committed to, his quarterback coach, Danny O'Brien's over at Virginia Tech. This is simply a hunch. I fully expect Ethan Grunkemeyer to end up at Virginia Tech. I like him a lot. I think he can be a 3-year starter for Penn State. I think he's just scratching the surface. But for Penn State, it benefits them so much more to go with Rocco Becht at QB1, get Alex Mansky, because then Becht, This guy has one more season. He knows the offense. He knows Coach Mauser's offense. He knows Matt Campbell as his head coach. There's nothing to relearn. There's no system adjustments.
That's true.
Becht's a good QB. I don't know how great he is, but he's a good QB. Then Alex Mansky is kind of that diamond in the rough. He's a veteran, right? He's a redshirt freshman. He was a highly touted quarterback out of high school. He's your QB2. And then you have the true freshman, Peyton Falzone, Casey Evans. No pressure on them, or not as much.
It's interesting. Rocco's dad played at West Virginia. So that's they're familiar with the area. I bet his dad probably dislikes Penn State, but if your coach is there, like his kid and him are
let it slide. Let it slide.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd be curious to see if Rocco does that or where he goes, what he's looking for NIL wise, because he's played for a long time. He's a great kid. I know him because I lived in Tampa and he was there. Really good dude. But just like anything else, man, you never know with the transfer portal. Until the ink is dry, I never go with it for sure.
Well, Brian, can I interject real quick? I just find it's completely interesting that Penn State does have its starting quarterback of the future already on its roster. Yet the discourse is they got to pursue Brendan Sorsby. They got to go after Sam Levitt. They got to go after Dylan Raiola. Why is the Penn State bubble talking about how Penn State needs a transfer portal quarterback when you already have a starting caliber guy on the roster? I'm just reading the tea leaves. I'm just reading the writing on the wall. I think Grunkemeyer is a 3-year starter, but you got to find a way. If you want to keep Grunkemeyer, you got to find a way to do what Michigan and Ohio State did. I'm not talking, Michigan with the cheating scandal, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how they would go and get a 5th, 6th-year veteran and pay him to be that veteran backup like they do in the NFL. They go get a journeyman QB, see what Phillip Rivers is doing. You get the college equivalent of that with Phillip Rivers in college football, and it's doable. Ohio State and Michigan have done it.
I would love that, but here's where I think the problem is. What is the word fan short for, Zach? What's that word short for?
Ooh, tough one. Fanatic.
Yeah. That's what Penn State fans are and a lot of fan bases. They're still in this, we're chasing a title mode. Mm-hmm. Are they really in title mode in 2026, you think? I don't think so either. No. That's why I don't think spending $3-4 million on a quarterback is necessarily the best route. Now, I don't know what Rocco would command. It'd probably be a couple million or something like that. At least. But it's not going to be the same money that like some of these other guys might be. Like, it doesn't make sense. And Rocco already, like you said, he knows the system. If you're going to go that route, that's the guy I would try to get. It's plug and play. Having stated that, Penn State fans, some of them, not all, but some of the crazies on every fan base, that 3%, they're not living in reality. So I agree with Sako. I would like to get the guy that's good, that, he can compete. If he comes in and just kills it in camp, okay, he starts. But most likely, we're going to go with Grunkemeyer, and we got a quality guy there. Then you can redshirt the other guys, go through a normal maturation process. That would be ideal. We'll see if that happens.
I just don't see how it happens. I don't see how you bring in Rocco Becht. Why would Becht want to be in a quarterback competition for his final year?
And he's going to be the guy. He would have to be told flat out he's the guy.
And then why would Ethan Grunkemeyer stay when he's already proven he can be a starter at the Big Ten level? He's like, well, I might as well go start and play the ACC for James Franklin. I totally get it. That's not a criticism of Ethan Grunkemeyer. It's understanding the reality of where we are.
Yeah, like if they don't go Rocco path, like he's the only upper guy that I would go after, and he's not top tier. But if you go anything else, I would go somebody below that that's just going to compete. I agree with you. Rocco's just unique because he knows the staff that's coming over from Iowa State. Plug and play is hard to at least not touch base with. I'm sure they've had conversations because it only makes sense. I have no idea where that's at. I haven't talked to Rocco, but that is intriguing. When we come back, speaking of intriguing, Penn State has added some coaches. They have lost some coaches. How is that going and why? We'll talk about that next on this crossover Locked On Nittany Lions and the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Why betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment no matter what. Live spreads and money lines will adjust as the action does. Player props and updates will happen simultaneously as guys get hot or get cold, and you can bet on the next touchdown, quarters. You can bet on a player prop, drive results, totals, just about anything with FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action all season long, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL-wide bets all season. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you once again for making Locked On the Portal and Locked On Nittany Lions a part of your day, each and every day, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in. Let's talk a little bit about Penn State's coaching hire. Zach, I'm going to lean on you. You're the Penn State know-it-all, everything around that program. You're diving into it because you enjoy it. With that, I trust Matt Campbell. He was the guy when this first opened up that I thought they should go after. They just happened to go to him later, ironically, but he ended up where I thought he should. Do you like let's start with this. Do you like the coaches from what you've read and learned that he's bringing over from Iowa State? And we'll get into the guys leaving after that. But like so far from what you know, and I'm sure you're still learning because it's a new group, where do you feel best about it? Is there any questions you have? Go through whatever coaches that you want that Matt Campbell is bringing from Ames, Iowa.
Oh, it's great. Best case scenario because you are moving on your additions by subtraction, right? Some assistants that Penn State fans have wanted out for quite some time. And, and you're replacing them with guys that did really well, did more with less at Iowa State. So this is kind of the best case scenario for Matt Campbell. One, retaining Terry Smith. So it's not even about the guys that he's brought over from Iowa State. It's the fact that you retain Terry Smith as your associate assistant head coach, right? Well, as at the time of that we're recording this, nothing is finalized in terms of titles, but this is the expectation. Okay. But guys that have been hired, the expectation, like this is a done deal. Terry Smith is on board. He's going to be on staff. That's great. Then you bring almost everybody over from Iowa State, and there's not a questionable hire. I mean, I guess offensive coordinator to an extent, Taylor Mauser, but he's only going in year 3. He's another rising candidate. I compared him to Ty Howell, who was the tight ends coach at Penn State. At some point, he was going to be an offensive coordinator. There are Iowa State people that say, hey, Taylor Mauser's good, but he's not great. He's really good at developing tight ends. Let's look at it from the glass half full scenario. He's just somebody that's getting started. So I am eager to see how things will go for Taylor Mauser in his first stint with Penn State, calling plays against Big Ten defenses as opposed to Big 12. But everybody else, you get Noah Polley at wide receivers, A+ higher. Deion Broomfield in the secondary, A+ higher. Retaining Terry Smith, A+ higher. It's more of the retention for me than it is who they brought over from Iowa State. And then there's the expectation that you're going to keep Dan Connor at linebackers, Penn State alum. Deion Barnes, defensive line coach, Penn State alum, responsible for developing Chop Robinson and Abdul Carter, Dennis Sutton. Dan Connor he is one of those guys that in due time, he might be a defensive coordinator. So here's kind of the questionable thing, because Penn State doesn't have a DC. John Haycock comes over from Iowa State, but he was contemplating retirement. So that's kind of the shakeup there. What's the plan ultimately with Haycock? Is he going to be just a senior analyst? Is he going to be the DC? How long is he going to stay in the DC role? And is that somewhat of a tentative promise that Dan Connor or Deion Barnes, you might have an opportunity in 2 to 3 years to be the defensive coordinator if Haycock if he contemplates retirement once again? Anthony Poindexter he's floating around. I would like Penn State to retain him. Maybe he wants to stay on it and be the DC. He didn't follow James Franklin immediately to Virginia Tech. So does he? But I've always heard that, hey, he might want to go to the NFL. He never truly wants to be a defensive coordinator. He's content with coaching secondary, NFL. It's kind of the same thing with Phil Troutwine, who ended up at Florida. But across the board, there isn't a hire here that I'm like, man, why did Matt Campbell do that? They're all justified, bottom line, if not over the moon with who you were able to add.
I think that's a really good synopsis. Thank you for that. So I have a couple of follow-up questions to it. let's start with the whole situation with defense coordinator. There's layers to that.
Yeah.
I mean, Connor is a guy that I remember his recruitment, all that. Like, he was a dude. He was a big time player. Goes to the NFL, blah, blah, blah. Now he's back at Penn State. I don't know if you know him or know people around him. Let me throw a scenario at you. If he's not the de facto DC year one, do you think he's enough of a Penn State guy, maybe even a lifer? I don't know him. That if he's not the DC year one, he would be willing, like if they told, hey, bringing the guy over from Iowa State, blah, 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 year or so, you'll be the guy. You'll learn the system to a certain degree from him. We'll blend them, put the two schemes together. Like, smart guys get together, they come up with stuff. That's just part of the world. Do you think he would be willing to do that, or is he too linear and he wants to do his own thing and this won't work?
I mean, to be honest, it's to be determined, because he was entertaining the rumors, reports. Hey, there were a lot of Virginia Tech people or people in Virginia Tech circles that were saying Penn State's going to get Dan Connor. And they never did. I think that's pretty telling that he didn't follow James Franklin. I also got this is more of a hunch than anything else, that, yeah, he'd like to be at Penn State long-term. I don't think he wants to bounce around from job to job. I don't think he wanted to go to Virginia Tech. I think he wanted to stay at Penn State, his alma mater, but he's one of those up-and-coming rising minds in the sport. He will be a coordinator sooner rather than later, but he hasn't been a position coach for that long. He's only been the full-time linebackers coach just this season. So for him to go to DC or entertain it, there's some people, a very fringe number of people were saying that, oh, you might want to consider Dan Connor to be the DC this season. You do not. You do not want to do that. But you want to get him more involved in the scheming, game planning, because that's how I see it. The blueprint is you get John Haycock in there for 2, maybe 3 seasons. You pass the baton to Deion Barnes or Dan Connor. I don't think Deion Barnes should be left out of this conversation either.
That's a good point. I mean, whoever earns it and whoever wants it, they're the next person. Obviously, Iowa State staff, incredible job in Ames for years. They probably had recruiting classes where they didn't sign a 4-star defensive player, literally. At Penn State, that's unthinkable. And yet they would have top 25 defenses. They'd have defenses that'd be top 10 in interceptions, top 10 in total yards, stuff like that. You'd be like, wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, they really do a great job. So with that being stated, is there any position, let's start with defense, that you're most concerned about, whether that it's a hire they have made, or is there a position left, analyst, anything left on defense that you're concerned about? Then we'll move to offense.
I mean, I want to see them retain Anthony Poindexter in some capacity, but they brought in Deion Broomfield to be a secondary coach. So does that mean safeties? Does that mean cornerbacks? I want to see them retain Anthony Poindexter, because then you keep some connections within the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, because you did lose a lot of those connections when we're going to talk more about recruiting here. But Penn State is making up for it by hitting the Midwest very, very heavy, which Penn State fans should be content with. So it's just geographically, they're just moving over. But on defense, if you have Deion Barnes, Dan Connor, Deion Broomfield, and then Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith all working together, and John Haycock, that's an all-star defensive staff.
Absolutely.
How it's all going to shake out, official titling, here's what I'm saying, though. As much as I would like Anthony Poindexter to stay on staff, I'm not anticipating it unless he becomes the next defensive coordinator and he wants to do that. And then somebody like John Haycock decides just to be, hey, he's a senior analyst for the next 1 to 2 seasons, but that's still great to have somebody like him on staff. So it's really to be determined at the time of this recording, but it's one of the more interesting things that we haven't seen have an answer to this point.
That's fair. That's fair. Now let's flip it over to offense. Most intriguing hires so far. What do they need? Where does Penn State stand on the offensive side of the football?
Kind of the same thing that it was. So let me rephrase. Everything is following over from Iowa State. So Iowa State offenses weren't phenomenal. They were pretty good in 2024, right? Taylor Mauser was in his first year calling plays, had a solid season his first year, but then took a step backwards. I think they were just dealt a lot of bad injuries last season, because that was an Iowa State team that was expected to contend for the Big 12 conference just this past season. But you get, again, Noah Polley, who's not just coaching the wide receivers, he is the passing game coordinator, or will be. He did that at Iowa State. I imagine he's going to do that at Penn State. Ryan Clanton's the offensive line coach. He's going crazy on the recruiting trail right now. He has been very busy. He is able to develop, but I also like that he's the run game coordinator. Penn State didn't have a run game coordinator last season, and it showed. I mean, there were people that were, but there was no designation, whereas Jaywan Sider was the designated run game coordinator. Notice how significant the step back was for the running offense when they didn't have a clear run game coordinator. I imagine Stan Drayton contributed, Phil Troutwine contributed, but there was no, hey, this guy is our run game coordinator. You have that with Clanton, and you have that with Noah Polley, plus their ability to develop their respective positions. So I like all those hires. The OC hire isn't flashy, but Matt Campbell wouldn't make that move lightly if he didn't think Taylor Miser had a promising future.
That's a good way to look at it. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Penn State recruiting, not just class of 26. We've got a lot to cover on the 27 side. That is next on this crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays are here, and whether you're hosting family, planning the perfect gift, or just trying to keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience straight to your door. And what makes it even better? Omaha Steaks, you always know exactly what you're getting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet sides, and decadent desserts that make anyone feel appreciated. If there's somebody that you have in your family or a friend that's just very difficult to buy for, let me ask you the following. How many people don't like any of the following? Steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, desserts, even side options, or getting an entire meal sent to your house, all the fixins. There's got to be something in there for that very difficult person. And you can also do something for yourself, and again, sent right to your door. Save big on gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com, and for an extra $35 off, use code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com. Promo code COLLEGE. All right, Zach, let's talk about one more area that is very, very important and near and dear to my heart, recruiting. I live it. I love it every single day. And Penn State will be the poster child for recruiting in many different fashions this next year for anybody. They have a small class coming in, less than 10 guys, new staff, but they did recruit the Midwest. They were in Iowa. Going to be a lot of overlap. The question is, can they figure out the East Coast stuff? I imagine they will, with some holdover coaches, et cetera, Connor, et cetera. My question to you is, I'm going with 35 guys for the class of 27. Is it like a barometer? They signed 10. Like, you need over 40 guys in today's college football world for two classes. 30 minimum, like it's just bottom end for what they're going to need. May even need one or two JUCO kids. There's a lot of different ways they could do it based on the portal. And they got to combine that with this portal. So I guess this is a two-parter. How many high school kids do you take in the next class? In ballpark, how much do you think they're really going to dive in for one-year portal players coming up in January? I think they're going to personally go for more 2- and 3-year guys. What do you think?
They want to rely on recruiting first and foremost, right? They want to build through the recruiting classes and then supplement with the portal. But initially, because I don't know how many people are going to stay and how many people are going to leave, but it's still Penn State because I think the roster is going to be just fine. It's an easy schedule. So if you get the right transfers, if you retain the right players, Penn State can absolutely be competitive next year.
Oh, yeah.
So we're already seeing it start to happen. Just about every name in the Iowa State class of 2026 is being released from their national letter of intent. Do they all end up at Penn State? Not necessarily, but we've already seen a number of them do that. So Penn State got 2 commitments in Jackson Ford, top fringe 200 player. He's a consensus 4-star defensive end out of the state of Pennsylvania. Peyton Falzone, tons of upside, freak athlete. If he can put it together as a passer, he's very raw as a passer, but Peyton Falzone's ceiling is one of the best in arguably the class of 2026. He just has to put it together. So that's the big question for him. So you have those two anchors in the class, and then you're adding guys from the Iowa State class: Tyrell Chapman, Bryson Williams, Casey Evans, two defensive backs and a quarterback respectively, and then a punter in Lucas Tenbrock. And I imagine they're going to get some more Iowa State carryovers from the class of 2026. These guys are long-term developmental players. They're not going to hit the ground running. So you need to go into the portal and get veteran third, fourth year, some one and dones, guys that are going to stick around for 2 years, maybe even 3. But see how many you actually can get in the class of 2026. Because I think Penn State should, I fully expect at least a dozen commitments, verbal commitments in the class of 2026, which is better than 2, which is way better than 2.
Yeah, 2's a problem.
But the 2027 class, just overall, maybe it's because I'm still a bit sour from the way that this recruiting trail went with James Franklin when he was running things, is that I think the 2027 class is much more intriguing. So if Penn State wants to double down there and go and get 35, 40 players, I'm all for it. We started doing early discussions. Again, Keemon Spell is in there. Matthew Gregory, Penn State just reoffered him, 5-star wide receiver out of the state of Pennsylvania. Peter Bork, 4-star quarterback who committed to Michigan. Penn State just reoffered him. I'm not saying Penn State's going to all get those guys, but the class of 2027, I think, has more talent in it overall, objectively, that Penn State would benefit from as opposed to the 2026 class. So double down there. Use the transfer portal to your liking this time around, and you got a formula.
That's a lot of stuff that's got to go right, but the plan makes sense. The plan makes sense. Here's the other part that I think is very important, and I know you'll agree with this because we've talked about this many times, specifically as it relates to 2027 Penn State recruiting class. It's a really good year in PA. They need to obviously get some of those kids. Obviously, the Iowa State coaches coming over, and they need to be directly involved. They need to start building that for long term. Mm-hmm. But the key for Penn State long term, like this is even before you were born, like when I first started watching recruiting, all that, when Paterno and Penn State really did well, they won a lot of battles: Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. I don't know how much that staff that's coming over from Iowa State knows that, but some of those guys they have on staff should. Mm-hmm. There's all, like Bergen Catholic, Patterson Catholic, any of those schools close to New York, anything up in that area, that is where they've got to get it over the top. Like they should win 2 out of 3 battles at minimum in state. They might lose a kid to Michigan or Ohio State or Notre Dame or Florida or so. Okay. But when they're really good, they get a couple more kids come across the river from Jersey, etc., from New York. How good do you feel about the guys they have that are holdover coaches on the staff, recruiting Jersey, PA, New York, the whole Eastern area, but specifically New Jersey, New York? I think that is the key because they should do well in PA.
I mean, we'll circle back here. That's why Anthony Poindexter is important, because he's your DMV connection. You lost that a little bit with Ty Howell. You lost that with Danny O'Brien, Marcus Higgins, but I don't think many Penn State fans are going to be bitter over that. And again, we don't know what Anthony Poindexter, I assume that he's not going to be on staff, but to be determined. So New Jersey, if you can, Deion Barnes is your Philadelphia, your eastern part of Pennsylvania coordinator. Terry Smith is your Pittsburgh. That's why the Pittsburgh pipeline to Penn State is so strong, because of Terry Smith. So that's massive. And I'm okay with Penn State saying the DMV is not our priority if you're going to double and triple up in the Midwest. Ohio, you start building, they're getting commitments from Nebraska. Now, I imagine that you'd say, well, there's still talent in DC, Maryland, Virginia, which there absolutely is. And I'm not saying you just forget about it, but I'm okay with Matt Campbell trying to recruit more Midwest guys to Penn State overall. Iowa, Nebraska, you start to build some connections in Texas and Oklahoma. You're not going to create a pipeline from Texas to Penn State. I don't need to, I know that's
two.
Yes. Sure. But you can start doing that where the Midwest replaces and supplements your losses in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area until that gets better. They're expected to retain Trace McSorley on staff. That's a plus. Again, the anticipation is they're expected to retain Dan Connor. That's a plus, but it's not as strong as it was, and that's okay. But you just got everything you needed to go and attack the Midwest, and I'm okay with that. I want to see how some of these Ohio prospects, Michigan, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, I'm eager to see how more of those players from that region do at Penn State, because Penn State is going to return more to a physical ground and pound. The defense was already hard-nosed, but I want to see the offense return to that a little more. And recruiting Midwest guys will actually help with that a ton.
I absolutely agree. Zach, thank you very much. This has been very educational. Penn State is going to be a unique study over the next year, maybe even two, with so much upheaval between the staff went to Tech. You got the Iowa State guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. Zach Sako, host of Locked on Nittany Lions. I am Brian Smith, Locked on the Portal. We will see you again soon.